She thought she was in control until she realized she was just a pawn in someone else's game. One wrong move and everything she built, her career, her reputation, was hanging by a thread. And him? He just stood up, smiled at the camera, and walked away, leaving her in complete humiliation. But the real nightmare was waiting the next day. You ever see one of those political talk shows where everyone pretends to be civilized, but you know they're just waiting for the moment someone slips up so they can go for the kill? Yeah, this was one of those. Lights blazing, cameras locked in, and an audience that wasn't here for a debate. They were here for a fight. At the center of it, Melissa Doyle, the queen of gotcha journalism. She was the kind of host who never raised her voice but could gut a guest like a fish with nothing but a well-timed question. Her smile, pure corporate charm, but her eyes, those were the eyes of a hunter. Across from her sat Donald Trump, as relaxed as if he were about to order a steak at his favorite restaurant. While Melissa sat upright, exuding authority, Trump leaned back, one arm draped over the chair, the picture of someone who didn't feel the need to try. If you didn't know any better, you'd think he was the host. Melissa adjusted the microphone clipped to her blazer, took a deep breath, and went straight for the throat. Mr. Trump, don't you think your rhetoric is becoming, let's say, increasingly dangerous for the country? No warm-up, no sugarcoating. She went for the heavy artillery right out the gate. Classic. Trump didn't even blink. Instead, he let the silence drag, watching her like a cat watching a bird that had no idea it was about to be lunch. Then, ever so slowly, he smirked. Melissa, come on, he said, voice smooth as butter. You know your audience hates me no matter what I say, right? I could be up here reading bedtime stories, and they'd still call me the villain. The room shifted. A few people in the audience chuckled, but it wasn't friendly laughter. It was the kind of reaction you get when someone cracks a joke at a funeral. Nervous, unsure if they should laugh at all. Melissa's expression didn't change, but her fingers curled slightly against the desk. She wasn't used to guests playing offense this early. So you don't believe you've contributed to the division in this country? She pressed, her voice steady but sharper now. Trump leaned forward slightly, tilting his head, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel almost conspiratorial. Melissa, sweetheart, he said. And right there, you could see her jaw tighten at the condescension. This country was split long before I got here. You and I both know that. And then the finishing move. But let's be real. You're not here for the truth. You're here for the clicks. Boom. The audience didn't know how to react. Some gasped, some muttered, and a couple of people in the back stifled awkward laughs. Even the camera operators looked like they had just witnessed a car crash and weren't sure if they should keep rolling or call for help. Melissa blinked once, twice. Her mouth opened just a fraction before she caught herself. For the first time in her career, she looked genuinely caught off guard. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife. The lights suddenly felt hotter, the cameras felt closer, and everyone watching, whether in the audience, at home, or behind the control panel, knew one thing for sure. This interview? It had just gone off the rails. If you thought Melissa was about to back down, you clearly don't know how these people operate. She wasn't just here to interview Trump. She was here to win. Sure, he'd thrown her off for a second, but you could see the way she straightened her posture, the way her grip on the desk tightened ever so slightly. That wasn't the posture of someone defeated. That was someone recalibrating, lining up the next shot. She took a breath, smoothing down the non-existent wrinkles on her blazer, and then hit back. Let's be honest, Mr. Trump, she said, her voice controlled, but with just a hint of an edge creeping in. Your policies have led to an unprecedented number of protests, legal battles, and even arrests. How do you explain that? Oh, she was swinging now. Trump, to no one's surprise, didn't flinch. Instead, he raised his eyebrows in this exaggerated, almost amused way, like she had just asked him if the sky was blue. Me? He said, pointing to himself like she had just accused him of stealing someone's lunch. Melissa, are you talking about my former lawyer who threw me under the bus for 5 minutes of fame? Or the guy who tried to get me locked up and then, whoops, turns out he had his own corruption scandal? His tone was so casual it was almost disrespectful, like this wasn't a serious question, like the very premise was ridiculous. And that was the thing with Trump. He didn't just answer questions, he flipped them, took them apart like an old watch, and handed the broken pieces back like, "Here, does this even make sense to you?" Melissa blinked. Just once, but the camera caught it. And see, that's the problem with being a professional interviewer. You can't show weakness. One wrong move, 1 second of hesitation, and suddenly it's your credibility on the line. She knew she had to regain control. So she pulled out the nuclear option, the one question she had specifically saved for the perfect moment. She squared her shoulders, locked eyes with him, and, with all the confidence of a lawyer delivering the final blow in court, asked, "Do you still insist that the election was fraudulent?" Boom. The studio went silent. You ever hear nothing so loudly it almost hurts? That's what this moment was. One of the camera operators literally froze mid-pan, the guy running the teleprompter, not even blinking. Somewhere off camera, someone shuffled awkwardly in their seat, and if you listened closely, you could probably hear a producer panicking in the control room. Because here's the thing. This wasn't just a question. This was a trap. Melissa knew it. Trump knew it. And the audience? Oh, they definitely knew it. This was one of those no-win questions. If he backed down, boom. Headline, Trump finally admits he was wrong. If he doubled down, boom. Headline, Trump refuses to accept reality. There was no way out, or at least that's what Melissa thought. Trump didn't blink, didn't shift in his chair, didn't even glance at the audience to gauge their reaction. Instead, he did something way worse. He smiled. Not a big, goofy grin, not even a smirk. No, this was a slow, knowing smile. The kind that says, "Oh, you think you got me? That's cute." He leaned forward, just slightly, lowering his voice, not in fear, but in control. And then, with the kind of deliberate slowness that makes you hang onto every word, he said, "Let's put it this way." Pause. "If I start telling the truth..." Another pause, longer this time, enough for the tension to triple in size. Then the hammer. "You're going to lose your job. You ever seen a verbal grenade go off in real time? Because that's what just happened." The moment the words left his mouth, the entire studio felt like it was holding its breath. Melissa's face didn't move, but something in her eyes shifted. The audience? Completely still, you could hear the hum of the studio lights. Trump leaned back again, completely unbothered, like he hadn't just dropped the biggest mic of the night. And Melissa? For the first time since the camera started rolling, she looked like she didn't know what to say. You ever watch someone realize in real time that they've lost? Not just losing a little, not just struggling. I mean, completely losing control of a situation they thought they had locked down? That was Melissa Doyle. For the past 20 minutes, she had been playing the part of the composed, authoritative journalist, keeping the conversation on track, steering it exactly where she wanted. She had prepped for this, studied every angle, had an entire team backing her up. But now, she wasn't the one controlling the interview. She was surviving it. And Trump knew it. He could see the hesitation in her movements, the way she adjusted her earpiece, as if waiting for a producer to save her. The slight change in her tone going from firm to just a little too aggressive. The way she was rushing now like someone trying to grab onto a rope that was already slipping through her fingers. She needed a knockout punch. She needed something. So she took her last shot. She straightened up, squared her shoulders, and let the words fly. "You're just a liar, Mr. Trump." The room froze. The audience held their breath. "Your whole persona is a fabrication." There it was. The moment. No more playing around, no more vague, indirect jabs. She had just called him out, point blank. No wiggle room, no escape. And Trump laughed. Not in a way that suggested he was nervous. Not in a way that looked like he was trying to dodge the attack. No, this was a different kind of laugh. This was the kind of laugh that said, "That's the best you've got?" He let it sit for a second. Let it breathe. Then he tilted his head, still grinning. "Oh, really?" The way he said it was almost mocking, like she had just asked if the sky was blue. Then came the hit that nobody expected. "And yours isn't?" The audience shifted. Melissa's expression flickered. For the first time all night, she looked like she hadn't planned for this response. She frowned just slightly. "Excuse me?" Trump leaned in, elbows resting on the desk, voice dropping just enough to pull everyone in. Come on, Melissa. You think I don't know who's feeding you these questions? There was a beat, one of those heavy silences where everyone, even the camera crew, felt the tension rise. Then he went for it. You think I don't know exactly how this was supposed to go? Melissa's lips parted just a bit, but no words came out. And that was a mistake. A silence that long on live TV? Fatal. Trump knew he had her. And when he knew he had someone, he didn't let go. Your producer gave you a script. Your bosses gave you a mission. You were sent here to do a tough interview. He tilted his head, pausing just long enough for it to sink in. Make a scene. Get a viral moment. Another pause, then, with the final twist of the knife. And you know what? It almost worked. Melissa's jaw tightened. You could practically hear the producers backstage panicking, trying to figure out how to regain control. Trump let her sit in that silence, let the weight of the moment fully land. Then he threw the final shot. Or, tell me this, you actually believe half the stuff you're saying? Boom. Checkmate. The silence that followed, brutal. Melissa's hands, which had been resting neatly on the desk, curled into fists. She opened her mouth to fire back, but stopped herself. Because what could she say? Deny it? That'd make her look defensive. Admit it? That'd make her look weak. She was trapped, and the audience knew it. They weren't watching an interview anymore. They were watching a loss. A slow, painful, televised loss. Melissa Doyle had spent her entire career mastering the art of control. The carefully measured tone, the unwavering stare, the ability to pull people into her rhythm and leave them scrambling for words. But now she wasn't in control. She was losing. And when people lose, really lose, they don't think. They don't strategize. They snap. Melissa snapped. She didn't just raise her voice. She exploded. You are a coward who refuses to admit defeat. Her voice cut through the air, sharp and unfiltered. No more polished professionalism, no more carefully curated balance, just pure, frustrated, cornered rage. The words hung there for a moment, bouncing off the walls of the silent studio. The audience, stunned. The producers backstage, frozen. Even the camera operators, who were trained to focus on their job no matter what, seemed momentarily stunned by the shift. And Trump? Trump didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't even pretend to be fazed. Instead, he did something infinitely worse. He smiled, not an angry smile, not a mocking one either. No, this was something far more calculated. This was the smile of someone who knew, without a doubt, that they had already won. He nodded slightly, as if acknowledging her outburst, then took his time adjusting the cuffs on his jacket. The kind of body language that says, I don't even need to be here anymore. Then, with the same casual tone you'd use to end a business meeting, he said, Great closing line. Pause. Then he stood up, calmly, smoothly. No rush, no panic, no need to defend himself. And then, while still smiling, he turned to the camera as if addressing an audience that had been watching the whole thing like a championship fight. Thank you, folks. That was fun. Then he walked off set, just like that. No shouting, no counterattack, no dramatic monologue, just a winner leaving the ring. And Melissa, she just sat there, frozen. Her breathing was still shaky from her outburst. Her fingers still dug into the desk. But the cameras, they were still rolling. And that was the worst part. Because the audience, the people watching at home, the clips that would flood the internet within minutes, they weren't seeing the fearless, sharp-witted journalist they were used to. They were seeing someone who had lost. Someone who had lost so badly that her opponent didn't even need to argue anymore. And in the media world, there's nothing worse than that. The studio stayed silent for a full 3 seconds before the host of the next segment awkwardly cleared his throat, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. But it was too late, because by the time Melissa could even think about recovering, the damage was already done. The next day, you couldn't go anywhere without hearing about it. The clip had gone everywhere. People were debating, analyzing, making memes, breaking down every second of that interview. Some were calling it the moment everything changed. Others were saying it was the biggest loss in live TV history. And Melissa Doyle, The woman known for always keeping her guests on the ropes, the woman who had built a career out of controlling the conversation, was now the headline of her own story. And not in a good way. What would you do in his place? What are your thoughts on this situation? Drop a comment, share your opinion, and don't forget to like. Have you or someone you know ever experienced something similar? Let's talk about it. This story was created to shed light on an important issue and make the world a better place.